Hi there, Steve Kaufmann here. Today it's election day in British Columbia, so I've got to finish this up and go and vote in our provincial election. But today I want to talk a little bit about a subject that I really get interested in, and it has to do with literacy. And I believe that the process of learning a language, a foreign language, has to be related, has to be very similar to the process of learning how to read and how to write. And I'm not an expert on literacy. I don't know about dyslexia, and I don't know about all these other problems in the brain that prevent people from learning how to read. I'm a little suspicious of all of that theory. But where I want to start is I am involved in a listserv, which is a sort of an email service where people exchange views on language learning and literacy. And in all of these discussions, there seems to be tremendous confusion. People talk about language learning and English as a second language learning and literacy all more or less at the same time. And I have trouble sorting out when they're talking about people who have some, native speakers who have an incapacity to read or read very well in their own language, as opposed to people who read well in their own language but can't speak English. And there's apparently a debate going on now because there is a funding crunch. And bear in mind that all of these, or so many of these organizations that are involved in good causes, very often they are mostly motivated by how they can get more funding. That's the business model. How do we get more money in the door? How do we get, different foundations or government to give us more money? That's obviously a major, that keeps them going. That's their lifeblood. So they're talking about now, what can we do to get more funding? So ProLiteracy, which, and I mentioned it on my blog post here, they come out with the statement that there's between 33 and 93 million Americans who could benefit from a literacy program. That's huge. And if you go to their website, they talk about a cost to the economy of, I don't know whether it's literacy or poor health literacy, of $238 billion and lots of good stuff, and the need for more advocacy and to donate here and how do we get more funding. And there's another one I mentioned on my blog post, the National Coalition for Literacy, and there again they're talking about advocacy. And as is so often the case with these things like literacy, which is so obviously a good, a social good, then it gets extended to cover other things that are considered socially good, like social activism and, the fight against HIV/AIDS and helping women and minorities, and all these things get wrapped up in this thing. But 93 million people, if that's the case out of 300 million, and presumably I don't know where the kids are in that equation, whether they're, I guess some kids can improve their literacy, but in any case, that's like 40% of the population. That's just huge. There is no way that those, even if it's only 30 million, they can't be accommodated in any kind of a classroom solution. And I guess my experience with language teaching makes me suspect that all of the efforts that, if you take all the money that is raised for literacy, and I have the impression a lot of it goes to these organizations where people meet and they publish websites and brochures and promote more advocacy and run, spelling bees or, all kinds of activities. I suspect that it's fairly top heavy in terms of administration, although probably a lot of volunteers are in there as well. But when you actually get to, where the rubber hits the road, as we say, how do you get someone who has trouble reading to where that person can read comfortably? What's the technique? And I suspect that the teaching techniques in literacy are just as overly complicated and ineffective as is the case with teaching language. And I suspect that the process of becoming a good reader is probably the same as the process of learning another language. And I'm just looking forward to hearing all the criticism I'm going to get, dyslexia and so forth. But I don't believe that 90 million Americans are dyslexic. I don't believe that 30 million Americans are dyslexic. So there must be other things happening there. I definitely do believe that kids that grow up in an environment where they don't hear many words because their parents don't talk about a variety of subjects. They're not discussing literature and history and geography and nature. They're basically talking about very limited things, and therefore using a limited number of words, that those children start school at a disadvantage because it's more difficult to learn to read words that you have never heard. And I think, reading, in a way, is just something that is written down. It's just a way of recording something that was spoken. The greatest works of literature, Homer, and great epic poetry from, in Chinese or Indian literature or Native American or African literature. I mean, these are all stories that were told and were passed on from generation to generation and then are eventually written down. So to my mind, someone who is a great storyteller, let's say an illiterate African storyteller, is very literate to me because he probably has all kinds of words. And I'm sure that person would learn to read very quickly. So listening and hearing words and being exposed to a variety of circumstances and a richer vocabulary and deeper, more varied, imaginative descriptions and so forth has got to make you a better reader. I don't see how it can not be the case. And so I suspect that, first of all, a big part of people who have trouble reading is people who haven't heard very much. And so, it seems to me that it's not difficult. Like I always go back to link. Like we always say, if you're learning a foreign language, don't just read it, listen to it. In fact, listen to it more than you read it. And if you have heard something in a strange language 2 or 3 or 4 times, it's then easier to read it because you now have a sense of what it's about. You know what to expect, so it's easier to read. I suspect as well that people who have trouble reading, it's because they don't have many words. And so some kind of a deliberate method of increasing your word power is key, because the higher the percentage of words that you know, the easier it is to infer the words that you don't know. So you don't need a lot of fancy techniques about inference and analysis and critical thinking. It's just you need to know more words, then you can put more of it together, and then you can naturally infer, what you're missing. So, I think, in fact, that Link would be a tremendous tool for literacy. And I have approached Literacy Canada. I have approached this Center for Applied Linguistics in the US and others. And I get the same answer all the time. It's either that because I'm a for-profit, Link is for-profit. Like we've invested so much, we're so far from being for-profit. Doesn't matter. You're for-profit, so that's no good. And I say, yeah, but it's free. You can use Link for free. We're not interested. We can't touch you. You're for-profit. We're not. No, we use other people's money. Other people who have made money in some kind of a profit-generating activity, who therefore pay taxes, and therefore we get money from the government, or we have a foundation, the Ford Foundation, who up until very recently made money, that is Ford did. So we use that funding, but we're not for profit. So you're for profit, so we can't talk to you. Or because I haven't studied at all of these linguistic schools and have been involved in producing peer-reviewed academic documents with pedagogical justifications and so forth, therefore I'm of no interest. So that they simply will not look at Link. And yet I'm convinced that if you have a system whereby you allow people to listen to a lot of things that they find interesting, if we provide them with a means of grading this listening material to their vocabulary level, if we always provide them with a transcript for what they're listening to, if we build in a tool for increasing your vocabulary, creating flashcards, creating statistics, seeing, the numbers grow as your vocabulary grows, all of the things we do in Link, I think would be very effective for literacy. And if in the United States 90 million people need help, some of them might benefit from Link. And the vast majority of people use Link free, and we really don't mind. And as a citizen of Canada, at least, I would like to help out if this is such a great big social problem. And I'd be happy to have it used in other countries, because I'm sure the United States is not unique when it comes to problems with literacy. But first we have to get past the advocates, the social advocates, and people who are, quite frankly, protecting their positions, which I guess is understandable. Anyway, that's my rant for today. Look forward to all the criticism. Bye for now.